Hi, this is Richard again. I wanted to talk to you today about my childhood growing up. It wasn't a very stable childhood. I grew up in a military family. I was born into being an Air Force brat in Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. I was born in Santa Maria, California. What I remember, my first memories were we moved every 4 years. So my first memory was probably 6 years old. And we lived in South Dakota, in Rapid City, at Ellsworth Air Force Base. And I just remember the freezing cold weather and the snow drifts covering the homes in the back, and not being able to go out the backyard because the back door because the snow drift covered the back of the house, and stuff like that. And I remember the first snowstorms and that I recall, and going out in the big white tundra up there in South Dakota. And I remember the B-52 planes. That was a B-52 station. I just remember the big, huge B-52s flying off and into their missions and of the days. And I was born in 1963, and I'm 63 today, January 7th. But I just want to pass this word along that not all youths and not all situations are the best, but I always looked at my life as a child as an adventure, because we moved every 4 years and we were all over the country. So we were stationed in I was born in Vandenberg and Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, and then we went to Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi, and then my dad went to Vietnam during those years and was there gone for a year. When he came back, he went to TDY in Florida, and we spent a summer down in Florida. Went to Disney World and Busch Gardens and had all the fun there. Went to Miami and the Keys and went down that way, and really enjoyed all of Florida. It was beautiful and great memories. And then my dad was stationed at Grissom Air Force Base, and that's where he retired. And then we moved to California, McClellan Air Force Base is where his final move was, and retired there. So, and that was also I was about 13 years old, and that was the summer of our bicentennial, 200 years of America. And the theme was the spirit of 76. So it was a great year, and I remember all the adventures that we had in between when I was a kid growing up, and going from Air Force Base to Air Force Base, and all the different lives and different ways of living. And like for Mississippi, it was a very very hard time in our culture, where racism was pretty bad in Mississippi when I was a kid. That was some of my first memories when I was 7, 8 years old, 9 years old, of seeing racism and being bused from school to school. The military kids were bused to an all-black school, and the kids from the all-black school were bused to our school, and we'd cross paths and along the freeway. But it was amazing experience back in those days. When we got dropped off at the other school, we were bussed off up to the auditorium and dropped off into the auditorium. And I remember we were told to sit there and wait, and as you could hear all the kids outside rustling around, getting ready to go to their class, and the bell would ring, and everybody would empty the class, and then they would allow us to go to our room totally separate from the rest of the kids. It was an all-black school, and we had our own classroom, and we had our own teacher, and she was black, and that was our school year that year. I was probably 2 years old, or I was in second grade, so I was probably 6, 7 years old, somewhere in there. And I just remember those years and how we were treated too differently because, we're in passing, with the color students going to our school. So it was the beginning of the change that the government was making Mississippi go through, and they were kind of like the last stronghold, for segregation. So I just remember those treacherous years. I remember military guardsmen with their M16 guns, in the parking lot, when we were dropped off at school. So it was a very memorable experience growing up, and I remember those years. And that's why my next video that's after this one it's called "The Last of the Lead Holders," and that's why I came up with that poem that I wrote there and explained to you in the next video. But in the successions of videos I have, they're all learning videos for everybody. Everybody goes through hardships in lives, and my parents weren't any different. My mom didn't work, and she was an Air Force wife, and my dad, had the military income, and when my dad had to go to Vietnam, we had to leave the comforts of the Air Force base, and my dad was having to scramble to find a place for us to live. So he borrowed $5,000 from my grandpa and bought a mobile home and put us on a mobile home, and then he was off and shipped off to Vietnam. So that was our baptism for my dad leaving to go to Vietnam. I remember the conversations we had with him were on tape. We would have a tape recorder, and we would tape our voice and ship it to him, and he would record his voice and send it back, and that's the way we talked back and forth. We didn't have the communications they have today. That was the way it was done, which was interesting if you think about it. And my dad would send back these toys from Vietnam. They were toy trains, HO trains, and he would send these trains to us, by shipment, and he would promise us when he got back that he would build a train set, and we enjoyed that train set when we were kids. So, as far as the Vietnam War goes along, it was always on the news every night. And Walter Cronkite was the CBS news anchor that everybody watched when I was a kid. That's what I remember. And just remember seeing the horrors of the war on TV being filmed, right there, and seeing what was going on and looking to see if I could see my dad, on TV. But one particular time I remember my dad's base was mentioned on TV that they were being attacked, and my mom was really upset, and she ran into the back bedroom, and I kind of followed her in, and she shut the door, and she grabbed the rosary on her nightstand, and she just started praying. And I just remember that very, very vividly. And after she kept saying the rosary beads and going through the beads, and I was just sitting there trying to calm her down, and she was very upset. And after a while, she was going through the rosary, and she started to calm down too. So there's a lot to say about being a prayer and thinking about that reminded me that praying is a good thing, and just to do it once in a while, and it's something I never really did until my wife passed away, and something I kind of lost track of it at a certain point in my life, and but it's something that brought me back to think about that in Mississippi. As we continued our adventures through growing up through the Air Force and different things I remember, and once my dad came back from Vietnam, and he kept true to his word, and And we started building that train set in one of the extra spare bedrooms in the trailer. In the trailer, we had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in there in between it, and so my dad built bunk beds for us 4 boys to sleep in, and the extra room was a spare room for us to play in. So the train set was in there, and it was folded up against the wall. And if we wanted to play with it, he folded it back down, and we could play with it. And we had other toys and sets up in there, and it was fun. It was a good time, and we got our first dog, Missy. It was a boxer, and so it was a good memories. And even though we moved around a lot, we were our own unit. We were together, and we had other family members. We went to go see my grandparents every year in Knoxville, Tennessee, and in the East Tennessee, near the Smoky Mountains. So that was always kind of our home base, of the 4 different stations we lived in over the 13 years. Knoxville, Tennessee was our home base. It was always like our home, away from home. And we always went there and visited our uncles and aunts and cousins, and had great get-togethers and fond memories of all that, and my grandparents, and going up in the Smoky Mountains and having picnics and floating down the river and with feet first, and just a lot of great memories and fun times going through all those years. And once Dad came back from Vietnam, we got stationed at Grissom Air Force Base, and it was kind of the first time that we were stationed that us 4 boys were all together, and we bonded pretty closely in those next 4 years, playing out in the woods of Indiana and climbing lodgepole pines and chopping them down and grabbing the next one next to you, and had a lot of fun adventures through those years. And I did write a book about all those years, called An American Stairway, and on Amazon you can look it up and read about it if you want to. And it's about the years of me growing up through the Air Force and all those years up until high school. And then so it was a fun time living in Indiana, and we were stationed at Grissom Air Force Base near Bunker Hill, and we went to Maconaquah Junior High School there, and it was a great school. It was new at the time, and had a auditorium, planetarium, and it was an amazing school. And I just remember it was a big school, and the biggest school I've ever been in. And because the school I went to before in Indiana was called Meade School, Meade Elementary, and that's where I went to before Maconaquah Junior High. So it was great memories and great times living in those days, and it was the 70s, and like I said, my dad was retiring in 76, and the spirit of 76 was upon us, and celebration of our country, and it was a big deal. It was all over. When my dad packed up when we were leaving, go back to California, and got stationed back in California, settled down, and we were kind of homeless for a while because our trailer broke down in Nevada, and they wouldn't let it go past the Nevada state line down the Sierras into California, because the beams in the trailer that buckled. So my dad, we actually used it as a moving van too. So we placed everything in all of our furniture and everything got pushed into the center of the trailer, and that's what put the excess weight on it and bent the frames of the trailer. So the California Highway Patrol wouldn't let go past the border. So we were camped out and homeless for the summer of 76, and stationed at a KOA camp in West Sacramento. And but we made it the best we could, and we just went camping. We weren't homeless. We just went camping, and that's the way my dad put it. And so we just explored the area and enjoyed fishing and for striper and just had a good time, camping and taking off on different adventures to the Sierras and going gold panning and camping up there and hunting and fishing. And it was just a fun memory. And the spirit of 76 was in us because we just traveled across the whole United States on our own adventure, or own overland adventure. And just like the settlers did 130 years before that, and during the gold rush years, and spirit of 76 was in us, and we remember it very well. And it was a fond memory and a good time and an adventure of a lifetime, traveling across the United States during that time and seeing all the different areas and all the different celebrations that were going on throughout the country. Being settled in California and get ready to start high school in my high school years, that's, looking back, the adventure of all of it and the closeness that we were together as a family, as one small group together, bonded us really closely. And all the adventures are in that book of our childhood, of the American Stairway. And the next chapter, I talked about, my high school years, going into my high school years, and I wrote a book about that, those years from the time I was in high school until I was 24, and went on my own to start my own business. And that book is called The Last Sled Holders. So, and that's another story in the next video called The Last Sled Holders. So, anyway, you go up and down, and what I remember is, the different ways of life throughout my childhood, and seeing different ways of life, good and bad. And America is all a big melting pot of everybody, of the whole world. And I've seen it change a lot over the years. And when COVID came around, it just seemed like everything, a lot of kids today, I think, suffered not having those adventures, in those next 4 years. When COVID started in 2020, it was a hard time for a lot of people, including me, when that's the year Sarah got sick and was in the hospital for a week. Then we started having our hard times, So you have a lot of ups and downs in your life, and hopefully you remember your childhood and the strengths that you have and the resilience that you learn of going through different areas of the country and learning to be free and experience in different parts of the country and the Smoky Mountains and all throughout the travels we'd had in Florida and the southern states and the overland adventure coming to California. Was a once-in-a-lifetime event, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it was a great adventure. And I highly recommend it for anybody who's in the Air Force to make it an adventure in a military family. And going through those years were very memorable. It wasn't as stable as a lot of people live in their hometowns most of their lives, never go further than that. A lot of people do. And but I was fortunate enough to travel throughout the country and see different parts and learn from it and saw what America was really all about. And now that we're coming up to our 250th anniversary, 50 years later from those adventures, I've lived quite a life going through those 50 years. And that was an adventure all of its own, and really enjoyed it all. And a lot of those adventures or in the last of the Lead Holders book. So hopefully I got some life lessons for you in these 4 videos that I've made. This video, the last of the Lead Holders video, and taking the leap of faith about marriage and young couples and moving forward in life. And then the last video is about grieving the loss of my wife. So, and how I got through that. So those videos hopefully help you, anybody that watches them, and that we all go through life and have ups and downs and have good childhoods and tough childhoods, and nothing's ever easy or perfect, but you just make the best of it as you can and enjoy the adventure of being alive and enjoying it the best you can. And that's the advice I have for everybody.